Hi, I'm Al Lawrence with CRUX Technology and Security Solutions in Fort Worth, and my esteemed colleague, Mr. Drew Dethridge. And he and I today will be talking about Alyssa's Law, some of the things to consider, what the law is, what's required of the law, the things to think about when implementing the solution to fulfill the requirements of that law, and some of the challenges that you may encounter along the way. So, Drew, let's kind of talk about the law itself and how did we get here?
Well, the law itself is really, dictated by the state that passes that law. So at this point, there is no federal legislation, there's no national codes around Alyssa's Law. As we know, Lori Elduff really is the brains behind this law. Unfortunately, her daughter Alyssa was murdered tragically in the Parkland shooting. She took it upon herself to mastermind this emergency communication system that has now gone nationwide. In fact, we have 10 states that have passed the law in its own version, and it varies by state. And then we have 18 more that are considering passing this legislation.
And I think that's one of the challenges right now, is because each state is determining or deciding what they feel is an adequate level of response.
Sure.
Because in some ways, and we see this in security all the time, there's that requirement to maintain a level or standard of care, which is why all the hotels on a single street have to maintain this similar level of security, because if you're the weakest on the link, you're more vulnerable. So as the state legislatures are interpreting what they want to do, I think that's one of the first challenges. Texas says this, Florida says that, Georgia may take ideas from both states and enhance, and everyone starts to move forward from there and progress. What do you think are some of the challenges you've seen at the state level with the different interpretations that we're seeing?
Well, so, let's kind of boil it down to the basics, right? So Alyssa's Law, while it differs state to state, really boils down to being in a silent panic alarm system. So the things that are consistent from state to state is that it must be silent. So once you trigger that button, it can't set off some visual alert or audible alert in that space, because we don't want to tip off, the bad actor that we are asking for help. The other thing that is required is that it communicate directly with emergency responders. In some states, they allow you to also communicate with on-campus officials, and some states require you to alert on-campus folks as well as emergency responders. But boil it down. We want a panic button that is accessible in every classroom. It must be silent, and it must notify first responders, and that's kind of it in a nutshell, right? So each state is bringing in their own requirements or their own interpretation of those basics. And like all legislators, right, they're defining the end result, but they don't know how to define technically how to make that happen. Right. And that's really where our school district partners are probably struggling a little bit, because now they have to go figure out, what does this mean? How do I implement it? Do I trust these vendors who are telling me that they have the one magic solution that will solve all my problems? But I think from your experience, Al, no matter how good a system or a manufacturer is, there's a lot of things you have to consider when you go to install and implement that new system, no matter how good or effective it might be.
Yeah, I've been working in K-12 since 1999, and I've seen a lot of changes on a lot of different solutions, both for security, for educational content delivery. The one thing we've always guaranteed is change. And
of course.
And how we, when we purchase a system, when we're looking at a system, we also have to be thinking about maintenance, training. You bought it, now what?
And don't forget, unfortunately, the legislation doesn't dictate testing. And if you're going to put this life safety system and you're going to rely on this thing,
Absolutely.
What kind of testing parameters are you going to, what sort of rigor are you going to put around that?
Right. Are you going to do it annual? Are you going to do it quarterly?
Right.
And when it comes to a life safety system, which this is, you also have to understand, when am I going to push this button? What things are dictating my action to go to this button? Whether it's a button on a wall, a soft button on a phone, could be a wearable device.
Mm-hmm.
But what events and actions have to be occurring to get me to that point where I have to initiate the call? Because sometimes we may have a student who's having a health condition. It's not something that we need a police officer to arrive to, you know. And sometimes if we have a student with an emotional issue, the arrival of certain personnel could only escalate the problem, not help to resolve it. And I think that's a big challenge for the schools today.
So putting operational policies around this and training your staff of how to use it. I know the interesting statistics out of the panic button usage out of Texas showed that the overwhelming majority of the time that the system was used, it was not for like an active shooter or armed intruder scenario. There were other things like health emergencies or fighting or other potentially aggressive behavior, but it wasn't necessarily an armed intruder.
Right.
But you bring up a great point. We have to establish kind of what are those parameters of when to use it. You don't want people to fear using it, but you don't want to overuse it. Plus, if this button does what it's supposed to do and goes directly to first responders, you're going to get the cavalry. They're going to come.
Right.
And some of these systems offer two-way communication, so that responding agency may be able to hear the context about what's going on, and some are just going to get us like a canned message that says there's an emergency in classroom 12 at Smith Elementary, right?
And I think it's also important to define who those emergency personnel are, not just our first responders. That's kind of a natural given.
Sure.
But who in the campus? Does my AP get it? Does my principal get it? Does my counselor get it?
Mm-hmm.
How far into the chain of leadership do we want, you know, these notifications to be sent, and who responds and how? And I think in addition to how are we responding, it's going to be very important for administrators to communicate to the teachers and the staff. These are the times when you really should be using the button, because the teachers, to your point, it's new technology. Is this a point where I use the button? Is this not? You know, Johnny slipped, fell, hit his head. He's breathing, not conscious. That to me is a push the button.
Well, anytime a scenario occurs that like where time is not on your side, right? You have a critical event like that where they need medical attention immediately. You know, if the police come first, I'm okay with that, right? And,
right.
I mean, it's really teaching your staff about what it is, how it works, when to use it. I don't know that we think a lot about that ahead of time. We rush to buy some new tech that's going to meet the intent of the law, and then there's all these other issues that we have to define. And if we don't do a good job of defining that, then we're going to be super disappointed with the end result. So you're bringing up the operational aspects, we run into that on every security system or life safety system we run into in schools. I mean, your 25 years of experience said there's no two schools that operate the same, right? And then we tend to forget about the people and the operational side of implementing the tech.
You brought up another good point, because who's making the purchase? You know, who's making the final decision on what solution, and have they included all the proper stakeholders in this?
For sure.
You know, administration's looking at it one way. The technology department has to be involved in this conversation, because it's almost for certain it's going to fall on that department to maintain and also look at the system and, okay, are there other ways we tie this system in with other things? A soft button on a phone, for example.
Right.
The tech group's responsible for the phone, but now I'm going to add this feature. Okay, is the technology group aware of this? Does it change any licensing factors about the phone that they have? Can the phone even do what they want it to do? So having that technology group is, to me, mandatory as far as its involvement in the decision making and the discussions for these systems.
Well, as you're looking at the use cases around this, while it's just a silent panic alarm, it could potentially touch a lot of things. The telephone system, or do you want it to do other things like lock the doors? If you want to initiate, soft lockdown, hard lockdown, there's all different opportunities to automate other systems, but then how are you going to tie into that system? And then what are the parameters, and is there extra equipment? Are there additional software licenses I have to buy to make all of those things downstream work? For another example is if I push the button, I may want to enunciate on a monitor in the principal's office, right? I may want to say exactly where the button was pressed, and I can even do a real-time update on what's happening at that point. But all of those things take coordination with other system owners and a handoff usually done with software today. We used to have a lot of hardwired connections in the old days, but not so much today.
Well, and I think that's another good point is it is easy. The system has to fulfill a certain requirement. That bar is here. It is very easy and very natural for school districts to look at it with what else could we do, and start adding more things to that. You're exceeding the intent of the law itself, but you can also create more headaches for yourself from a maintenance standpoint, and the integrations, and the last thing we need is a life safety system that isn't doing the basic level thing that it was actually put in for.
Unintended consequences.
Unintended consequences, exactly.
So Al, if I'm a school board member, or I'm an administrator, and I know we need to take action, why wouldn't I just call the last vendor I got an email from in my email box?
That is a big challenge for school districts today, because not just with Alyssa's law, but with everything that comes forward, whether it's a state-driven requirement or it's just a new technology, there's a plethora of manufacturer solutions that are coming. Some, we've talked about some of those, the physical button, the soft touch on the phone, the wearable devices. There's a lot of due diligence that is needed. And it's tough because that takes time. And time is one of the resources that a lot of our school districts have a challenge with. I have a certain, window to get this done. It may be tied to funding. It may be tied to a grant. There are a lot of outside challenges at work there, but it's important to take that moment and say, we've got plenty of opportunities to do this wrong. Let's take a moment to focus on doing it right. And let's do our diligence, and let's look at different solutions. Are they standalone solutions? Are they solutions that come from, maybe you have an existing manufacturer who makes other solutions for your campus or your school district that you have trust and faith and that works, and this is just an added on feature. One of the benefits that could come from that is the integration side. If I have a contractor who already understands that manufacturer's solutions in this category, I'm now introducing the same manufacturer, different category. That could help. It could also, there's also going to be a learning curve for the integration group. And I think that's also another challenge that the clients need to think about. Not just what the system's going to end up being, but who's going to help me maintain it? Who's going to install it? What kind of warranty questions are going to come up? 1 year, 3 year, 5 year? Are there any requirements that manufacturers may start putting forward as part of the warranty? You want 5-year warranty? That's great. But I want you to test it every year. Make sure it works. There's a lot of places and directions this can go.
Sure.
But I think doing your homework on these systems, and again, administration, technology group, law enforcement, everybody needs to be putting their hats on to think about all the different ways this could go wrong before making that investment. Because in the end, you're likely to be using taxpayer dollars to fund this installation. There are grants available that you could apply for. None of that is ever guaranteed. So, like with anything, be good stewards with your community's money, and think before you buy.
So if I hire a consultant, I would expect that consultant to come in, be completely agnostic, right?
Yeah.
That one of the advantages is your consultant should have broad experience across multiple technology systems, and what I really want that consultant to do if I'm hiring them is to come in and help identify the use cases. Okay, so we know we're going to do the minimum to meet Alyssa's law. There are other use cases we want to implement, like lockdown, like mass notification, and other things that we might want to do. And then help write that basis of design, right? Nothing more than just a Word document where I write down, I want these things to do these things, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's going to take, and then it'll define what kinds of equipment I'm going to need to be able to perform the basic functions that I've outlined in this overall requirements document. And then once and you bring up a great point, Alyssa's law is a bit unique, right? Because not only do I require IT and operations, now I have to coordinate with law enforcement because they're getting a direct notification. Thank you. So they're immediately involved.
Yeah, and that same group gets involved every time you test it.
Sure.
You better be communicating to your first responders, I'm going to be testing the system during these days for these campuses at this time. Please ignore everything from 1 to 3. Anything after that, and think about alternative ways. If you do have an emergency that happens to be during your testing time, I'll notify you this way. That way you know, okay, that's not a test, that's a real world situation that just happened to happen during my testing.
Sure. So, you know, having that consultant to help you define exactly what it is you're going to go do, understand all the parts and pieces that you're going to have to touch to make that happen, and then be involved in the design across the different manufacturers and systems you're going to have to touch. And then who can be involved is, you know, all the way to in testing and implementation. So all of those things are valuable, especially since we have, while the technology of wireless panic buttons or silent panic buttons is not new, the implementation across every school district in Texas is new, right?
Yeah.
So you have a lot of, you know, in Texas we have over 1,000 school districts. Oklahoma, we have over 400 school districts. This is a lot of change to absorb. And no two school implementations are probably going to be exactly the same.
And when you mention the wireless, that's also important to remember that this is not your standard Wi-Fi that delivers the educational content to your students. You know, these wireless buttons have to communicate to another device that helps tell the proper authorities and personnel that that button was pushed in room 12. And so you have to, when you think wireless, you're like, okay, great, I've got wireless, woohoo. I didn't have to put conduit and back boxes or power or run data drop. I can just put the button on the wall. Well, that button has to talk to things. And so thinking about where those gateways are located, or those hubs, depending on the manufacturer, they have different names and terms for these devices. But you have to think about where those gateways are going. Those gateways are going to require a physical drop. I'm going to need to take switch ports out of my MDF and IDF rooms. And so I also think that's, again, another reason why tech has to be involved because we're going to be using some of their real estate, some of their infrastructure. To your point about the consultants, I also think, having a level of agnosticism is, to me, has to happen. So we're of clear mind to help clients make decisions. Our job is to educate them in the goods, the bads. Here are the things to think about if you go here. Here are some other things to think about where you could take this system further. But having that level of agnosticism is critical. But I also think it's important for those consulting groups and the design teams. What else are they doing? Are they just doing this because, hey, it's an opportunity for business? Are they doing this and they also happen to be involved in other organizations that exist for the sole purpose of educating and guiding people on other life safety systems? There are organizations out there today that can help you. Are those consultants part of those coalitions?
Well, that's true. Our other co-founder, Gail Maricki, is himself now a member of the Safer Buildings Coalition, who they are actively working on creating some kind of national guideline to give people more specific direction on how to implement these wireless I keep saying wireless, I really mean silent panic systems. Although there are certainly a handful of school districts that have gone strictly to the wearables, which if you have the budget to do that is probably a fantastic idea. That way it's always on your body at all times.
The emergencies don't always happen in the confines of a classroom.
Exactly right.
Could be at a walk to the restroom, could be in the corridors, the playground areas, common areas, cafeterias, gymnasiums. All those places that, emergencies don't meet set definitions of floor space. Anytime, anywhere.
Right. Well, while most of the legislation requires a button to be present in the classroom, there's certainly many other areas in the school building, as you're mentioning.
Yeah.
Whether it's the auditorium, the cafeteria, the gym, what have you. So lots of things to think about. So not only do I have to wade through all the different manufacturers and all the different solutions, then I have to wade through, well, how do I actually implement this in my school district? And then I have to get down to, okay, so Smithville ISD has decided to put this in all of my schools. Well, all of my schools are likely different. So now how do I implement it specifically on each campus, right? That requires a level of design and coordination.
Mm-hmm.
And then before I even get really that far down in the design, I have to work out all the operational details. Okay, who's gonna do what, when, who's going to respond, and then I have my employee training issues, right? How do I train staff? Is there any expectation of students? Like, do I have teachers' aides, and and then what expectations are there of my volunteers and my substitute teachers? And there's all these layers of things you have to work through and think through as you're working out an implementation plan.
Well, and I think that staff, when we talk about making sure the staff understands, you bring up two of our larger vulnerabilities, is how are we educating our substitute teachers that are filling in just for the day? We may have parents in there that are part of a PTA group. What are you going to do as a district if PTA is in your school during hours, in a space that's inside that building? What are you doing to make sure they understand the do's and the don'ts of, maybe they have a life safety issue that occurs. Maybe a volunteer is having some sort of health emergency. Those are the other subtle factors, although not the intended focus of the law itself, but could serve as a benefit, kind of a side benefit, if you will, of, hey, we were able to save this person's life because the PTA president knew about that button and was able to push that and get a response in time. that helps save the individual.
Sure.
You don't know. So I think, the implementation piece is also important. The quality control aspect, making sure that things are done in a uniform set way by the integrator, but that they're also held to a certain level of quality control in how we test those systems. Each room will be tested this way. And all of that needs to be put in writing. So the integrator understands what they're supposed to do, the owner understands what they're supposed to get, the consultant understands what they're supposed to do to make sure both those things happen. And I think that is critical in and of itself, because again, we are talking about a life safety system.
So there's a lot of challenges around this, right? One is we first have to define what it is we're going to go do. Then we need to get a design together. And design not just for the silent button system itself, but any other systems that it touches. And then we have to manage the delivery of all that, right? So it has to get installed. It's usually going to get installed in phases. And how do we, what sort of quality control plan do we have in place to make sure, as you just mentioned, that it's uniform across all the buildings in my school district, that it works the same way, and that that if a teacher were to go from campus to campus, they're going to understand it's going to work exactly the same in any building in their school district. So we have the define, we have to design it, we have to deliver it, and then last but not least, we have to train on how to use it. And I'd probably say the fifth step really is, what's day 2 look like? How are we going to maintain this? How are we going to test its functionality? Because I took public funds to install a life safety system, and I better be sure that it works when I need it. So all of those factors, that's a lot to consider if you're the guy or the gal who has to implement this in your school district.
Sure.
It's a lot to get your head around, on top of the fact that, oh, by the way, you're supposed to be running a school district and teaching kids, not having to, design advanced electronics and make it all work behind the scenes. An enormous responsibility for our school partners.
Indeed. Well, good conversation.
Yeah.
I mean, as we've talked about, there's a lot of things to consider. There's a lot of opportunities, both for success and failure. And I think it's important to make sure everyone's going in kind of eyes wide open on this, and not be so locked in as to get a button, get a solution, be done, check a box. There's a lot of different things to take into consideration before finalizing on systems like this.
If only that were that easy, right?
Yeah. If only we didn't need them. So, real good.
All right. Well, thanks for your time, Al.
Yeah.
Good conversation.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Awesome. Thanks.